The sun was shining brightly that morning, and the sky was painted in a perfect shade of blue. Marcus Williams woke up feeling lighter than he had in months. His job as an FBI agent was demanding long hours, stressful cases, and the constant pressure of dealing with dangerous situations. But today was different. Today, he wasn't Special Agent Marcus Williams. He was simply Marcus, a father and a husband, ready to spend an entire week with the people he loved most. Angela, his wife, was already busy in the kitchen, making breakfast for the family. The smell of fresh pancakes filled the air, mixing with the sound of sizzling butter on the pan. Their two children, Jaden and Amara, were upstairs, rushing around their rooms, too excited to eat. They had been counting down to this vacation for weeks, marking off each day on the big calendar in the kitchen. The plan was simple but perfect. They would drive to the coast, check into a small beach resort, and spend their days swimming, eating ice cream, and walking along the shoreline. No phone calls, no work emails, no stressful meetings. Just family, laughter, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Marcus walked into the kitchen, smiling as he saw Angela humming to herself. "You look happy," she said, glancing over her shoulder. He chuckled. "I am happy. I've been waiting for this trip all year." After breakfast, they packed the last of their things into the car. Marcus carried the heavy cooler. Angela double-checked the sunscreen and beach towels, and the kids ran back and forth, making sure they hadn't forgotten their favorite toys. Jaden brought his soccer ball, and Amara carried her small stuffed dolphin, saying she wanted it to see the ocean too. Once everything was ready, Marcus locked the front door, and the family piled into their silver SUV. The atmosphere inside the car was full of excitement. Jaden and Amara argued playfully over what music to play first, while Angela handed out snacks for the road. Marcus started the engine, and with a deep breath, they were off. The highway stretched out before them, lined with tall green trees swaying gently in the summer breeze. Angela took photos of the kids in the back seat, their faces glowing with joy. They played travel games spotting different colored cars, guessing songs on the radio, and telling silly jokes. Marcus couldn't help but feel proud. He had worked so hard to give his family moments like this, safe, happy, and full of love. He glanced at the rearview mirror, watching his kids laugh, and he silently promised himself that nothing would ruin this trip. They stopped at a roadside diner halfway to the coast. The place had old-fashioned booths, a jukebox in the corner, and the kind of homemade pie you could smell as soon as you walked in. The kids devoured their burgers and fries, while Marcus and Angela enjoyed a quiet cup of coffee together. For that moment, the world outside didn't matter. Back on the road, the landscape began to change. The scent of salt water drifted in through the open windows, and soon, the sparkling blue of the ocean came into view. Amara squealed with delight, pressing her face to the glass. We're here," Marcus smiled. This was what he had been waiting for, the look of pure joy on his children's faces. The long hours at work, the missed dinners, the sleepless nights, they all felt worth it when he saw how happy they were. The car rolled into the small beach town, with its colorful shops, friendly locals, and the sound of seagulls overhead. They were just minutes away from checking into their resort and starting the perfect vacation. At that moment, none of them could have imagined what was waiting for them up ahead. The laughter, the sunshine, the excitement, it was all about to be interrupted in a way they could never have predicted. But for now, they were simply a happy family on the road, chasing the dream of a week filled with nothing but love and peace. The road into the small coastal town was calm, almost too calm. The Williams family had just passed a row of pastel-colored shops when Marcus noticed something in his rearview mirror, a police car. At first, it didn't bother him. As an FBI agent, he knew patrol cars were a common sight. But as minutes passed, he realized the cruiser wasn't just on the same road, it was following them. He kept driving at the speed limit, his hand steady on the wheel. Beside him, Angela was scrolling through her phone, looking up restaurants. Near their resort, the kids were still laughing in the back seat, trying to decide who would get the first turn at building a sandcastle. None of them had any idea what Marcus was feeling in that moment. A slight tightening in his chest, the kind that comes from years of instinct telling you something is off. The police car crept closer. Marcus glanced at his mirrors again. The officer inside seemed to be watching his every move. Still, he told himself there was no reason to worry. He wasn't speeding, the car's registration was up to date, and they were just a family on vacation. Then, without warning, red and blue lights flashed. The siren let out a short, sharp wail. Angela looked up, startled. "Marcus, why are they pulling us over?" she asked. Marcus pulled the car to the side of the road, near an empty stretch of sidewalk. "I don't know," he said calmly, though inside he felt a knot forming in his stomach. Years of law enforcement training told him to stay composed. But this wasn't just any stop, this was happening in front of his wife and children. The kids fell silent. Jaden's eyes grew wide as he whispered, "Dad, did we do something wrong?" Marcus gave a small smile in the rearview mirror. "No. Buddy, just stay calm." Two officers stepped out of the cruiser. Both wore dark sunglasses, making it impossible to read their eyes. One was tall and broad-shouldered, moving with an air of authority. The other hung back slightly, but kept his hand near his holster. The tall officer approached Marcus's window. Leaning down, his voice was firm, almost cold. "License and registration." Marcus handed them over without hesitation. "May I ask what this is about, officer?" "You match the description of someone we're looking for," the officer replied flatly. He glanced at Angela and the kids, then back at Marcus. "Step out of the vehicle." Angela's head turned sharply toward the officer. "Is that really necessary?" "We're just—" "Ma'am, stay in the car," the officer interrupted. His tone carried no warmth, no explanation, just command. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had been through countless tense encounters in his career, but those were with suspects, not as a suspect himself. "All right," he said quietly, unbuckling his seatbelt. He stepped out into the sunlight, the breeze from the ocean barely cutting the heat building in the air. The second officer moved toward Angela's side, tapping the window. "Ma'am, please step out as well." Angela hesitated, her eyes darting toward Marcus. The kids began to fidget, sensing something was wrong. "It's okay," Marcus assured her, his voice steady but low. Within moments, the Williams family stood on the sidewalk, the SUV's doors left open. Strangers across the street paused to watch. The officers kept their distance from Angela and the kids, focusing their attention on Marcus. The tall officer began asking pointed questions. "Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Have you been in this area before?" Marcus answered each one calmly, but inside, frustration grew. He had been taught to treat civilians with respect, to explain actions and keep situations from escalating. These officers, however, seemed to have no interest in transparency. As the questioning continued, one officer stepped behind Marcus. The sound of handcuffs clicking open filled the air. "Turn around," the officer ordered. Marcus's eyes flickered toward Angela. She was holding the kids close, her face a mix of disbelief and fear. Jaden's voice broke the silence. "Why? Are they doing that to Daddy?" No one answered. The only sounds were the waves in the distance and the metallic snap of the cuffs locking in place. For Marcus, the cuffs weren't just tight around his wrists. They were a heavy reminder of something far deeper. His years in law enforcement had shown him the ugly side of bias, but now he was living it firsthand. And worse, his children were watching it happen. The officers didn't know who they were dealing with, not yet. To them, Marcus was just another black man who fit a description. But soon, they were going to learn the truth, and it would hit harder than they could imagine. The air felt heavy, almost like the whole town had gone quiet to watch what was happening. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, hands cuffed tightly behind his back. The steel pressed into his wrists, and though he had been in handcuffs before, on the other side of the law, this time it was different. This time, he wasn't an FBI agent making an arrest. He was a husband and a father, humiliated in front of his family. Angela held on to Jaden and Amara, as if her arms could shield them from the ugly scene unfolding. The kids were too young to fully understand, but old enough to feel the fear in the air. Jaden's small voice trembled. "Mom, are they taking Daddy away?" Angela swallowed hard. "No, baby. Daddy didn't do anything wrong." But even as she said the words, she could feel eyes on them, people walking by, a couple. From a nearby cafe, an older man leaning against a shop window. None of them stepped in. They just watched. One of the officers, the taller one, started patting Marcus down roughly. "Empty your pockets," he ordered, though Marcus's hands were already restrained. The other officer stepped closer to Angela, keeping a hand near his weapon as if she were a threat. "Ma'am, please step back," he said sharply. Angela's voice rose, frustration breaking through. "He's not a criminal. We're on vacation with our children." "You have no right." "Ma'am, I said step back." The officer barked, his tone carrying the kind of authority meant to shut down arguments. Marcus took a slow breath. His FBI training told him not to escalate, not to give them any excuse to claim resistance. He could feel the anger boiling inside, but he forced it down. "Angela," he said softly, "just do what they say for now." His eyes met hers, silently telling her to trust him. The taller officer began asking questions in a clipped, suspicious tone. "Where are you coming from? What's your reason for being in this area? Who owns the vehicle?" Marcus answered each one clearly, his voice calm but firm. The officer didn't write anything down, didn't seem interested in the answers. His body language screamed something else, accusation without proof. Meanwhile, Amara tugged at Angela's arm. "Why are they being mean to Daddy?" she whispered. Her little voice cracked, and Angela bent down to comfort her. "Sweetheart, sometimes people make mistakes," she said gently, though deep down she knew this was about more than just a mistake. A small crowd was beginning to gather now. A few people pulled out their phones, recording from across the street. Angela noticed one young woman holding her camera high, her face a mix of disbelief and anger. Marcus, still calm, decided to speak up. "Officers, I would like to know exactly why I'm being detained," he said, making sure his words were precise. The tall officer didn't answer right away. He glanced at his partner, who gave a small shrug. Finally, the tall officer said, "Like I told you, you match the description of someone we're looking for. Black male, medium build, driving a silver SUV." Angela's jaw dropped. "That's all you've got? Do you know how many people fit that description?" The officer ignored her. He pulled Marcus's wallet from his back pocket without asking and began flipping through it. Angela took a step forward, her heart pounding. "Hey, you can't just..." Then the moment that would change everything happened. The officer stopped, his eyes locking on a small piece of laminated plastic inside the wallet. It was Marcus's FBI identification card. His face shifted, just slightly at first, but enough for Angela to notice. His jaw tightened, his posture stiffened. The other officer leaned over to get a look, and his eyebrows shot up. Marcus didn't say a word. He just watched them, his silence heavy with meaning. The officers looked at each other, and for the first time since the stop began, there was a flicker of uncertainty in their movements, but they didn't uncuff him. Not yet. They seemed frozen, as if processing what they had just learned. Angela stepped closer, her voice steady but full of heat. "Now you know exactly who you just put in handcuffs, in front of his wife and children. What are you going to do about it?" The taller officer cleared his throat, glancing quickly at the small crowd still recording. His voice was suddenly softer, almost apologetic. "Sir, can we talk for a moment?" Marcus gave a short nod. "We'll talk. But you're going to take these cuffs off first." The sound of the key turning in the lock was sharp in the quiet air. The metal released, and Marcus rubbed his wrists slowly, never breaking eye contact with the officer. What had started as a family vacation was now something else entirely, a public scene that would stay in their memories forever. And while the officers might have hoped the situation would end there, Marcus knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Asterisk the moment the cuffs clicked open. Marcus felt a rush of relief in his wrists, but there was no relief in his heart. He had been in tense situations before, had stared down dangerous criminals, had worked undercover in places most people would never dare to go. But never had he felt humiliation like this, standing on a sidewalk, in broad daylight, treated like a criminal in front of his wife, his children, and a street full of strangers. Angela stepped closer to him instantly, her hand on his arm. She didn't say anything at first. Her eyes said enough. They were full of worry, anger, and a silent question. What now? The tall officer, suddenly unsure of his own authority, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His voice, which had been sharp and commanding moments ago, now came out quieter. "Sir, we may have made a mistake." Marcus stared at him, not moving. "A mistake?" His tone was calm, but his words carried weight. "You detained me in front of my children for no reason." The shorter officer glanced toward the small crowd that had gathered. More people were holding up phones now, recording every second. The tall officer's jaw tightened. "Maybe we could, talk about this privately." Angela stepped forward before Marcus could answer. "No, you made a very public scene. Everyone here should see how it ends." Her voice was firm, the kind that carried over the street noise. The tall officer's eyes darted toward her, but he didn't argue. Instead, he tried to explain. There was a call, a report about a suspect in the area. The description matched. Marcus cut him off. "Matched how? Black male, silver SUV, that's it?" He took a step forward, his presence suddenly towering even without raising his voice. "Do you have any idea how many families fit that description? Or did you just decide that I looked like trouble because of the color of my skin?" The silence that followed was heavy. Even the seagulls overhead seemed to have stopped calling. Angela looked down at their children. Jaden's small hand was gripping hers tightly, and Amara was leaning into her side. Both kids were still wide-eyed, their vacation excitement replaced by confusion and unease. Marcus turned to the crowd, then back to the officers. "I am a federal agent. I have worked with local police departments across this country. I know what proper procedure looks like. And this," he gestured toward the spot where he'd been cuffed, "is not it." The shorter officer cleared his throat nervously. We're sorry, sir." His words sounded forced, almost rehearsed, like he knew they were being recorded and was saying them for the camera. Marcus didn't let them off that easily. "You're not apologizing to me. You're apologizing to my wife, to my children, because they just watched their father get treated like a criminal for nothing." Angela's eyes burned into the officers. "Do you have any idea what this does to a child? How do I explain to them that their father, who works to keep people safe, can still be treated this way?" One of the bystanders called out from across the street. "Yeah, explain that." Others murmured in agreement. The taller officer seemed to shrink under the weight of all those eyes on him. We didn't know who you were." Marcus's response was instant. "That's the point. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with basic respect." The words hung in the air like a challenge one the officers couldn't answer. They stood there awkwardly for a moment longer before muttering another apology and stepping back toward their cruiser. Angela bent down to talk to the kids softly, telling them it was all over, but Marcus knew it wasn't. Not for them. Not for him. As the officers got back in their car, Marcus felt the weight of what had just happened settle deeper. He had two choices: let it slide, like so many incidents that went unreported, or make sure this one didn't disappear into silence. Angela touched his hand. "Let's get to the hotel," she said gently. "We'll figure it out from there." Marcus nodded, but inside he was already making a silent promise. This wouldn't be just a bad memory from their vacation. This would be a story told loud enough to make people listen. He opened the SUV door for his family, watching the patrol car slowly pull away. The crowd began to disperse, but the whispers and stares followed them as they climbed back inside. Road to their hotel was short, but the air in the car felt heavier than it had that morning. The laughter, the music, the road trip games, they were gone. In their place was a silence filled with unspoken thoughts. For Marcus, that silence was more than uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Because he knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end of their vacation. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Asterisk. The hotel lobby was warm and welcoming, but to the Williams family, it felt like just another stage where people might be watching them. Angela walked in first, holding Amara's small hand, while Marcus carried the luggage. Jaden followed quietly, his usual energy gone. The receptionist greeted them with a smile, but Marcus barely noticed. He gave his name, took the key cards, and thanked her politely. His mind was still on the flashing lights, the cold metal of the cuffs, and the way the officers' faces had changed when they saw his FBI badge. Inside their room, the kids ran to the balcony. From there, they could see the sparkling blue water stretching to the horizon. It should have been the view that started their vacation, joyful, exciting, full of possibility. Instead, the mood felt different. Heavy. Angela closed the sliding door to block out the sound of the waves and turned to Marcus. "We need to talk about what happened," she said, her voice low. Marcus set the suitcases down and nodded. "I know." She crossed her arms. "The kids saw everything, Marcus. You can't just tell them to forget it." He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together. "I'm not telling them to forget. I don't want them to carry fear every time they see a police car. They're too young for that." Angela's eyes softened, but her voice was still firm. "They've already seen it. Now they need to understand it." Before Marcus could answer, Jaden and Amara came back inside. "Daddy," Jaden began, "why did they put those handcuffs on you? You didn't do anything." Amara climbed onto the bed next to Marcus, her small voice adding, "Were they going to take you away?" Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He had interrogated hardened criminals without flinching, but his children's questions cut straight through his defenses. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "They weren't going to take me away. They made a mistake." "But why?" Jaden pressed. "Why did they think you were bad?" Marcus glanced at Angela. She gave him a small nod. It was time to be honest but careful. "Sometimes," Marcus began slowly, "people make judgments before they know the truth. They see someone and decide who they think that person is, based on things that shouldn't matter, like the color of their skin." Amara frowned. "That's not fair." "No," Marcus said softly, "it's not." The kids sat quietly, processing his words. Angela moved to sit beside them, her hand resting on Marcus's knee. "The important thing," she told them, "is that we know the truth about who your dad is. And nothing anyone says or does can change that." Marcus nodded, but inside, he was thinking about more than just their family. He was thinking about every other father, mother, son, or daughter who didn't have a badge to pull out, who didn't get the benefit of that last-minute realization from the officers. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. They unpacked, ordered room service, and tried to shift their focus to the beach waiting just outside their window. But the laughter didn't come easily. Later that evening, when the kids were asleep, Marcus stood on the balcony alone. The night air was cool, the ocean dark under the moonlight. Angela stepped out beside him, holding 2 cups of tea. "I know that look," she said softly. Marcus took the cup and sipped. "I keep thinking, What if they hadn't found my badge? What if they decided to take me in before checking anything? Angela didn't answer right away. She knew he wasn't asking just for himself. He was thinking about the bigger picture, about the kind of world their children were growing up in. Finally, she said, "Then you make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." Marcus turned to look at her. I mean, you have a voice, Marcus. You have experience. And after what happened today, you have a story that people will listen to. Don't let it stay here in this room. Her words lit a quiet fire inside him. He had planned to let the incident ruin as little of their vacation as possible, but now he saw it differently. This wasn't just a personal insult. It was a symptom of something larger, something that couldn't be ignored. He reached for her hand. "All right, but we finish the vacation first. For the kids, then." His voice hardened with determination. "Then I make sure people hear it." Angela smiled faintly. "That's the man I married." Below them, the ocean waves kept rolling in, steady and relentless. And Marcus knew when the time came, he would be the same. The next morning, the sky was painted with gold and pink as the sun rose over the ocean. The Williams family decided to try and salvage their vacation. Angela convinced Marcus to take the kids down to the boardwalk for breakfast. The smell of fresh waffles, coffee, and salty sea air drifted through the streets as they walked, hand in hand, trying to pretend yesterday never happened. The kids laughed again, pointing at souvenir shops filled with seashell jewelry, bright t-shirts, and buckets of colorful saltwater taffy. Marcus smiled faintly, grateful for the moment of peace. But under that smile, his mind was still carrying yesterday's weight. They stopped at a small cafe near the pier. The place was cozy wooden tables, seagull sketches on the walls, and the sound of waves crashing just outside. The family found a booth by the window. Angela ordered pancakes for the kids, and Marcus got coffee and eggs. Slowly, he began to relax, but then, the bell above the cafe door rang. Marcus looked up and froze. Walking in, wearing the same uniform as yesterday, was the shorter of the two officers from the roadside stop. He wasn't in sunglasses this time, but Marcus would never forget that face. The officer scanned the room casually, then his eyes landed on Marcus. For a split second, his expression faltered, recognition, guilt, and discomfort flashing across his face. Angela noticed instantly. Her jaw tightened. "Marcus," she murmured. "I see him," Marcus replied quietly, his voice calm but sharp, edged. The officer hesitated in the doorway. He could have walked out, avoided the awkwardness entirely. But instead, he approached the Williams table slowly. His hand rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit Marcus had seen in many people before. Morning," the officer began. "Mind if Marcus didn't move. "Go ahead," he said evenly. Though his eyes didn't leave the man's face, the officer slid into the empty seat across from Marcus. He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. "I wanted to say sorry, again, about yesterday." Angela crossed her arms. "You already said that." "I know," the officer admitted, "but it's been on my mind all night. I didn't handle things the way I should have." "Neither of us did." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "And what exactly have you been thinking about?" The officer glanced at the kids, who were now poking at their pancakes, sensing the tension. He lowered his voice. "I've been on the force 6 years. I've had training, plenty of it, but yesterday, we didn't act like professionals. We acted on assumptions." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Assumptions can get people killed," the officer nodded. "I know, I'm not saying it's okay. I guess I never thought about how fast a bad decision can spiral until I saw your kids' faces." Angela's voice softened, but only slightly. "Then remember those faces. Because not every family gets the ending we got yesterday." The officer swallowed hard, nodding again. "You're right." He paused, then added, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to say this in person. I don't want to be that kind of cop." Marcus studied him for a long moment. If you mean that, you'll speak up when you see it happen again. Even if it's your partner. Especially if it's your partner. The officer's eyes flickered with something fear, maybe, or the weight of knowing that was easier said than done. Still, he nodded. I'll try. Marcus's tone sharpened. Don't try, do it. The table fell silent. Outside, the morning bustle of the boardwalk carried on, families walking, gulls calling, vendors opening shop. The officer finally stood, giving Marcus one last look before heading to the counter to order his breakfast. Angela exhaled slowly once he was gone. Do you think he meant it? She asked. Marcus sipped his coffee. Maybe, but words are cheap. What matters is what he does next. The kids stayed quiet for the rest of breakfast, and Marcus wondered if this encounter had helped them understand the complexity of what happened, or if it had just added another layer of confusion. Either way, it was a reminder that the story wasn't over. As they left the cafe, Marcus glanced back at the officer. Their eyes met briefly. It wasn't friendship, and it wasn't forgiveness, but it was an understanding. A silent agreement that the next time could be different. Or at least it should be. That afternoon, the beach was alive with the sounds of children laughing, waves crashing, and radios playing faint music from different corners of the shore. The Williams family sat under a large umbrella, trying to soak up what was left of their vacation. The kids were busy building a sandcastle, and for the first time since the roadside stop, they seemed truly carefree. But Marcus wasn't. He sat in the beach chair, sunglasses hiding his eyes as he watched the horizon. Angela, lying next to him, on a towel, noticed the way his fingers tapped restlessly against his leg. You're thinking about it again, she said. I can't help it, he admitted. It's not just about me, Angela. This happens to people every day, and most of them. They don't have an FBI badge to change the outcome. Angela propped herself up on one elbow. So what are you going to do? Marcus didn't answer right away. He listened to the waves for a moment, feeling their steady rhythm. Then he said, I'm going to tell the story, publicly, with every detail, not to humiliate them, but to make sure people see the truth. Angela's eyes narrowed slightly. That's going to ruffle some feathers. Good, Marcus replied. If it makes the right people uncomfortable, then maybe they'll think twice before doing it again. He reached into his bag and pulled out his phone. For the rest of the afternoon, while the kids played and Angela read a book, Marcus began writing everything down, every word spoken by the officers, every expression on their faces, every detail of how it felt to be judged instantly, unfairly. When they returned to the hotel, Marcus kept going. He typed late into the night, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. He didn't just want to write a complaint for the department. He wanted a story that anyone could read and understand, whether they were in law enforcement or not. The next day, he called a reporter he knew from a past case. I have something you're going to want to hear, he told her. His voice was steady, but inside, he could feel the weight of what he was about to set in motion. The reporter didn't waste time. I'm listening. Marcus laid it all out. What happened, who was involved, how it felt for his family, and why this wasn't just about him. He explained how quick assumptions could turn an ordinary day into a dangerous one, especially for people who didn't have the resources or authority to push back. The reporter's tone shifted as she listened, moving from curiosity to determination. This needs to be published, she said. And it needs to be published soon. Angela listened from the other side of the room. She didn't interrupt, but when Marcus hung up, she spoke quietly. Are you ready for what comes after? The attention? The questions? Marcus looked at her, and then at the kids, who were watching. A cartoon on the hotel TV, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. If it makes things better for them in the future, he said, then yes. I'm ready. 2 days later, the article went live. The headline was bold, the kind that demanded to be clicked. FBI agent detained while on vacation. racial profiling in broad daylight. Within hours, it was spreading across social media. People shared it with anger, with disbelief, with messages of support. Others, predictably, argued against it, claiming the officers were just doing their job. Marcus read every comment, not because he needed validation, but because he wanted to understand the conversation. And while the debate was loud, one thing was clear: people were paying attention. That night, as they walked along the beach under the moonlight, Angela slipped her arm through his. "You've started something," she said softly. Marcus nodded, watching the waves roll in. "Yeah," he replied. "And I'm not stopping now." The morning after the article went viral, Marcus woke to the sound of his phone buzzing non-stop. On the nightstand, missed calls, unread messages, and endless notifications filled the screen. Reporters wanted interviews, strangers sent words of support, and a few sent messages full of hate. It was the kind of attention he had expected, but seeing it arrive so quickly still felt overwhelming. Angela was already up, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee. She looked at him with a mix of pride and caution. "You've started a fire, Marcus," she said quietly. "Good," he replied, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Maybe it'll burn away some of the ignorance." By mid-morning, local news crews were waiting outside the hotel. The manager politely asked Marcus if he wanted them removed, but he shook his head. "Let them stay. If people want the truth, I'll give it to them." Down in the lobby, microphones and cameras crowded around him. He spoke calmly, clearly, and without bitterness, just facts. He described exactly what happened, how his children had watched it unfold, and how dangerous these quick, unfounded assumptions could be. "I'm not telling this story because I'm an FBI agent," he told them. "I'm telling it because I'm a father, a husband, and a black man in America. And the truth is, I only got to walk away that day because of the badge in my pocket. Too many others don't get that chance." The footage aired that same night, replayed across national networks. The police department released a brief statement saying the incident was under review and promising internal discussions about policy and training. Marcus had heard enough of those vague promises in his career to know they often went nowhere. But this time, the story wasn't going to disappear quietly. Emails began pouring in from civil rights groups, community leaders, and even police. Officers who admitted they'd seen similar situations and hated them. Some asked Marcus to speak at forums. Others wanted his help pushing for new training standards. He accepted every invitation he could, knowing that momentum like this didn't last forever. Angela watched all of it unfold with quiet strength. She knew the risks: criticism, threats, the possibility that Marcus's work relationships could strain, but she also knew this was his calling. And when she saw him speaking to a packed town hall one evening, telling their story with passion and clarity, she realized the incident on that sunny vacation morning had transformed into something far bigger than they could have imagined. For the kids, life slowly went back to normal. They built sandcastles, chased waves, and collected shells during the rest of their vacation. But even in their innocence, the memory lingered. One night, as Marcus tucked Jaden in, his son asked, "Dad, will the police be nicer now?" Marcus hesitated, then smiled gently. "I hope so, buddy. That's why we're telling the story. So they think before they act." Months later, Marcus learned that the two officers from that day had been sent to additional training programs. Whether it would truly change them, he didn't know, but at least it was a start. The story stayed alive online, shared in discussions about racial profiling and police reform. It became an example cited in law enforcement workshops, not just as a lesson in what went wrong, but in how someone could use their voice afterward to push for better. On the anniversary of the incident, Marcus returned to that same small coastal town, not for revenge, but for closure. He stood on the same stretch of road where the flashing lights had once turned a happy morning into a nightmare. The ocean breeze was the same, the gulls still called overhead, But the feeling in his chest was different. Angela came up beside him, sliding her hand into his. "Still think about it?" she asked. "Every day," Marcus said. "But now, I think about what came from it, too." They walked back toward the car where their kids were waiting, their laughter carrying over. The sound of the waves. The vacation they had once thought was ruined had, in a way, become the beginning of something larger, a reminder that even the most painful moments can grow into change if you refuse to stay silent. And as Marcus drove away from that small town, for the second time, he knew this was no longer just his story. It belonged to everyone who had been judged too quickly, treated unfairly, or silenced. And it would keep being told, until one day, maybe, it wouldn't need to be told at all.